Today I'm bringing you a general guide to how to do the most super damage on Titan. It's a very straightforward guide, but I just want you to know what exotics to use and generally how to set up your builds to do really good super damage so that you can be good in any kind of endgame damage encounters. We have a lot of boss rush modes, and then there's always raids and dungeons. Just to start off, I am showing a Prismatic Thundercrash build using Cuirass of the Falling Star, and the goal here is we just use our melee as much as possible, because that will recharge our super, and we can use Transcendence to do that with Consecration, which is amazing, and that will let us generate a lot of super energy. You can see the super is already charged. It's been less than a minute, and we've already got that up just from consecrating a bunch of enemies. See here, Consecration, even with the nerf this episode, remains extremely strong and extremely spammable thanks to Transcendence. That sounds good to you? Let's get into it. I'm Engineer. Some of you may have seen my video from about a week ago talking about super DPS versus total damage. There was some testing recently that talked about total damage, and then people made a lot of conclusions, so I tried to put out some information on, hey, here's also DPS, it's also good. DPS is a really good metric, and generally what I would focus on if I am doing raids or dungeons, because they have timed DPS encounters. If you're in something like a Grandmaster Nightfall or seasonal activity, you can go by total damage, it's totally valid. So I have a table which I will link in the description, so you can go refer to all these. I will be keeping it up to date for the future, just so there's a nice readable version that has both options for you. Every single one of these damage numbers is tested with optimal exotics, aspects, and fragments. The testing damage was mostly done by Aegis and Spider Reviver, two great community members who do some really solid testing. The thing to note here is the DPS is calculated based on how long you are not able to shoot. So that is your super duration or lock or animation lock, which I've listed here. For some of these, it will be longer depending on the content. For some of them, it might be shorter if you prep it just right. As a great example, Thundercrash has the highest DPS right now with Cuirass. It is very, very strong. It outdamages everything by a pretty significant margin. However, it only really occupies you for about 2.2 seconds. But you are not in the same position as you started. You land near the boss, so you're going to have to reposition, and there will be some DPS loss there. So that is the absolute peak if you time perfectly, but that may not always be the case. Below that is Synthoceps Twilight Arsenal, which is very solid. Glacial Quake is the highest total damage super in the game by far, which is really cool. Now, your last instant super option is Pyrogale Gauntlets Burning Maul, and it's fallen behind pretty significantly. It's not a lot of total damage, not a lot of DPS, and that is just disappointing. Generally, I would say most roaming supers are not ideal for DPS. There are some cases where Glacial Quake makes sense because of how long it lasts, but it's rare that you have a very long damage phase where you can make use of that, and that's generally best with very large bosses where the crystals all shatter. An overview of what exotics are good for Titans for supers: it's Cuirass of the Falling Star, Synthoceps, Pyrogale Gauntlets, and Spirit of the Star Eater. And you can see a very brief basically outline of what I'm going to talk about here, but let's just go ahead and get into the exotics and the builds. So first up is Cuirass of the Falling Star. So this boosts just Thundercrash damage by 55%. Now, the coolest part about this is it gives a significant amount of super energy on melee kill while amplified. Doesn't have to be powered melee kills, any melee kills. And this works on every single super. If you want to get your super really fast, just equip this. You won't get the super damage benefit, but you'll get your super very quickly. Especially on something like Prismatic, where you have the knockout aspect that gives you amplified on every melee kill. So really solid. If you don't have it, it requires Beyond Light, and you can get it from Rahul's Novel Decryption or Vex Strike Force, but one of the best exotics by far. So just to demonstrate that, this is the build for the gameplay I showed at the beginning of the video. This is a Prismatic build. You want to get amplified, get melee kills, and then Thundercrash. So we're using Consecration Knockout, which gives us that amplified on knockout, and Consecration gives us a giant AoE melee, which is really solid. I take Glacier Grenades because it helps balance out the Transcendence energy, and you take Frenzied Blade because it has 3 melee charges, and your class ability can be whatever you want. We take Courage because that'll boost the damage of our super by 10% when we can inflict the Darkness debuff. Protection gives us damage resistance, and Purpose gives us access to Bolt Charge, which is pretty cool. And Facet of Solitude lets us sever bosses during those damage phases, and Facet of Dawn will give us Radiant for 20% more weapon damage. You can also consider Facet of Dominance if you put on a Void Grenade or an Arc Grenade that will allow you to weaken or jolt respectively. And then for your stats, focus on Resilience, focus on Strength, then Discipline, then Recovery, then Intellect. So that's the build I was using earlier. I'll have a dim link in the description, so check it out. A different flavor of the same build is Cuirass, but on Arc. Arc got a lot of buffs this episode and a new aspect called Storm's Keep, which I recommend here. Once again, it's melee kills plus amplified equals super, and they use Bolt Charge Barricade to keep doing DPS after that. So on here, our grenade's gonna be Pulse Grenade because it does the most total damage out of the whole Arc kit. We're gonna use Thunderclap because it has the best AoE and damage, so you can get those melee kills to build up your super. Now over on our Fragments, we're gonna take Spark of Resistance because it's 25% damage resistance. We're gonna take Spark of Amplitude to generate Orbs of Power to get that super even faster. Take Spark of Shock because it lets our Arc Grenade jolt on hits so that we just get a little bit more DPS in those boss phases. And lastly, we take Spark of Frequency, which will give us extra Bolt Charge whenever we gain Bolt Charge. Some alternative fragments you might consider: you can take Ions, which will give you a little bit more ionic traces, and then you can take Spark of Magnitude, which will make those pulse grenades last just a little bit longer. On your stats, it's very similar to the last one: Resilience, then Strength, and then Recovery and Discipline. And then just try and get Intellect to 30 so you don't take a penalty. Now, here's some gameplay of that. This is once again the same Legend campaign checkpoint here, just so you can see the comparison. We Thunderclap a bunch of enemies at the beginning just to get hard damage back, and then we sit behind their barricade. There are a lot of ways to work the barricade. I'm using arc weapons here just for maximum subclass synergy, but you do have a lot of options for what you can use. Like Le Monarch is really good here. Just try and catch as many enemies in this Thunderclap as possible, because you can see we're already at like 75% of our super here. Air denial grenades can also build up a lot of bolt charge, which is really nice for that. If you're more curious about bolt charge mechanics, I have a build video for a bolt charge barricade build, which I call the Stormtrooper, from earlier this episode, so check that out. Does really great AoE damage and just good damage over time. Completely with a Thunderclap here, but it's okay, we've already got our super, so not too bad. The barricades are really strong. They grab a lot of aggro, they take a lot of damage for you, and it's really solid for surviving, especially on these classes that don't have a lot of built-in healing. Just clearing out the rest of these enemies, including these Cyclopses. Snipers. These Minotaurs just like, hey. Let's punch them. Saving our Thundercrash for the boss. A little bit low here. Ooh, boss trying to crash us, but nope, we're gonna crash him back. Boom. Just nuked. So, as you can see, very effective, very strong. One of the best DPS options this episode. Cuirass and Bolt Charge Barricades from Storm's Keep, just a match made in heaven. Moving over to our most generally useful super damage exotic, and that is Synthoceps. This is a very old exotic from the base game. You can get it from any source. You can even get it from one of Ikora's starter quests. But if there are 3 enemies within 15 meters of you, you get the buff called Biotic Enhancements, and that gives you plus 50% super damage. That's all. Just leave some ads alive, and then you get plus 50% super damage. It also will boost melee and glaive energy. You can see a snip from the Destiny Data Compendium here. So really straightforward, really good for melee builds, and just this works on every single super for Titans. One small thing to note is that the Spirit of the Synthoceps does not have the super damage side of it, so don't think you can use that for super damage. It's just the pure Synthoceps exotic. First build I want to show off here is Synthoceps with Twilight Arsenal. Your main goal here is just get your super and hit harder. So we'll be taking advantage of the damage buffs a little bit, and then we're just going to try and keep Overshield up as much as possible, and we're going to use Offensive Bulwark to double the damage of our melee whenever we have Overshield, and get some pseudo-powered melees from that. For the grenade, I like Magnetic Grenade. It's one of the shortest cooldown grenades on Void. It has a 75% flat gain factor. And then we're going to take Shield Throw. You can also take Shield Bash. They both have the same flat gain factor and cooldown, but Shield Throw can hit more enemies, and that's nice for building up super energy. For your class ability, I recommend Rally Barricade just for the slightly shorter cooldown so we can get that overshield from Bastion. Our fragment setup is really straightforward. We take Echo of Starvation so that we can get Devour on every orb pickup. We take Echo of Harvest so weaken enemy kills generate an orb of power. And then we take Echo of Persistence so our Devour and our overshield last 50% longer. And then lastly, we take Echo of Undermining just so we can get weakening grenades for DPS phases and for triggering that Echo of Harvest, Echo of Starvation loop. You can also think about taking Echo of Instability for volatile rounds on your void weapons, and Echo of Reprisal will give you straight super energy when you kill enemies while surrounded, but I just really like these other fragments, so I don't quite get there. Now, our armor stats, you want to maximize resilience, then discipline, then strength, then recovery. Pretty standard stuff. So, once again, gameplay here. Kind of lead with the grenade, weaken some enemies, and throw your overshield. I'm not talking about artifact perks in this video, but there are great artifact perks in Heresy 4 Voids to take advantage of that. One thing about Offensive Bulwark is if you have Void Overshield, it will give you it'll turn your normal unpowered melee into a pseudo-powered melee, which is really helpful, which gives you overshield and just really good for generating super energy. See here, just topping off our overshield by punching stuff. We're already a little bit over halfway of our super, which is not too bad. Good kills. I haven't been talking about mods too much, but just generally build as much as possible for super energy and orbs, and you'll be set. Our goal here is getting our supers fast, and then we also want to boost weapon damage. So we're going to take some kind of surges on the legs and just make sure we have that covered. Being a kind of melee focused build, I like shotguns, but you don't necessarily have to. See, we've got our super now. Now usually I would clear out all the other enemies before going after the boss, but here we want the enemies alive. So you can see biotic enhancements is up, and we just shredded the boss in 2 axes. Overall, really solid, really straightforward. Just get your melee kills, hit hard, and then just use your super on whatever you need to destroy. Another Synthoceps build is Stasis with Glacial Quake. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is the highest total damage super in the game on all 3 classes. Our goal is use melee and grenade to get super and shatter everything. We're going to be creating crystals left and right, and the shatter of those will count as whatever they source from so that we can get as much super energy as possible on orbs. We're also going to be trying to keep up frost armor as much as possible thanks to Tectonic Harvest, and we're using the special melee of Howl of the Storm to just get a little bit more AoE on that melee ability. For the grenade, we want Glacial Grenade, which has a 62.5% flat gain factor, and we only have Shiver Strike. And Rally Barricade's fine for your class ability, but it's flexible. For your fragments, I first recommend Whisper of Rhyme, which will let you stack up Frost Armor to 8 stacks for a total of 50% damage resistance. Then we take Whisper of Conduction so we don't have to hunt down Stasis Shards. They'll come right to us to keep that Frost Armor up consistently. We're going to take Whisper of Fissures, which I generally don't recommend because it's only a 6.25% damage boost to Shatters. But because our super leans on shatter damage so much, we want that extra 6% damage. And then we're gonna take Whisper of Shards. So every time we're shattering crystals, we will be getting plus 500% base grenade regen speed for 6 seconds, which is really solid. Some other fragments you might want to think about are Whisper of Hunger, which lets you get more melee energy on Stasis Shards. And then there's Whisper of Bonds, which will let you create an Orb of Power on killing frozen enemies, which just lets you get your super a little bit faster. On your armor stats, you're going to focus on resilience, then strength, then recovery, and discipline. And then, as always, intellect to 30. All right, once again, very similar gameplay here. We use Howl of the Storm to create some AoE damage. And then we use that Glacial Grenade and the shatters from it. I would say this probably has one of the lower super regens of the build so far. But fortunately, because this counts as a roaming super, they do get a 3 times multiplier to active super regeneration, so that's from like weapon damage or ability damage, and that's really helpful. I'm not using much artifact perks here, but the Elemental Supercharger artifact perk with the boost will give you about 3% super energy on every stasis shard with a little bit of cooldown, and that will get you this insanely fast this episode. That is very episodic, so don't worry about that if episode Heresy is no longer here. You can see even with all that, we've still pretty much got over 75% of our super here. We're having to play a little bit more careful. I'm using a Headstone Prime Stealer weapon just to really round out that frost armor and make sure we have a source of crystals constantly. This is a Fair Judgment. It is a ritual weapon from last episode, and you can just get it from the kiosk. Stasis Shards do great shatter damage now. They got buffed last episode, and that's great. A lot of reloading. Punching out that enemy. We've got our super back. We're just trying to manage these enemies while we wait for the boss to spawn. You can see the crowd of minotaurs has spawned here. So with our biotic enhancements up, we're going to pop our super. Try not to kill them because we want to keep the biotic enhancements up. But you can see we've already shredded the boss after just a few seconds. And now we'll just work on getting rid of everything else. Not too bad at all. Really solid damage for most activities. This is going to be pretty strong. This is a stasis focused build, but once again, this is also available on Prismatic, so definitely just take Glacial Quake if you're not sure what to do. It's very versatile and good in a lot of activities. Super damage exotic is Spirit of the Star Eater, and this is only on Prismatic, and it's only available on the exotic class item. If you don't have this, you need to generally complete Dual Destiny to unlock Perk Attunement. Then you can get it from Dual Destiny, Overthrow, or Xur as much as you want. There are no other good super regen perks to combine this with. You used to be able to combine it with Spirit of the Bear, but that does grenade energy now, so I would generally combine it with Spirit of Inmost Light just to get your ability spam up, because that's one of your best ways of getting super energy back. But it's pretty flexible. You have a few options. What does this perk do? Generally, if you collect 6 orbs after the super is charged, it will boost super damage by 70%, but that is dropped to plus 50% for Thundercrash, which is why Cuirass is generally better, and it's dropped to plus 25% for Twilight Arsenal. So Synthoceps, which is plus 50%, is generally better. Now, if you have a really good other exotic class item perk, maybe that pushes it over for you, but Cuirass is really good on regen and super damage, so I would definitely take that. Synthoceps can be a little finicky to trigger depending on your damage phase, so maybe that doesn't make as much sense, and this is a little bit better. I don't have any builds to demonstrate this, but once again, it can slot in fine with Thundercrash or Twilight Arsenal. This is a really good one to use with Glacial Quake because it will boost the damage actually more than Synthoceps, but I just didn't want to show too many Prismatic builds here. That's probably one I would definitely recommend for that. Our very last exotic is one that is specific to a single super, and that is Pyrogale Gauntlets. Converts a Burning Maul from a roaming super to an instant super, so it does one slam that does 650% damage, and the duration generally is cut from about 15 seconds to 3.8 seconds. That boosts the DPS a good bit. It will also strengthen Consecration and make little fire cyclones. If you don't have this, it requires Lightfall, and you can obtain it from Rahul's Now Decryption or Vex Strike Force. Overall, this is a pretty solid exotic, but I think it's just been power crept a bit. The damage and DPS is just a little bit low. This exotic will also take away the roaming super benefits that Burning Maul gets, so you don't get the increased regen, which is a bit of a bummer, but it still works pretty well. It needs some buffs, and hopefully there's a focus on Solar Titan in the future because they're still short in aspect. If you want to do a build for this, you generally just want to get solar ability kills. We're using Roaring Flames, which will boost our solar ability damage as we get solar ability kills, and then we're going to use Consecration to take advantage of that secondary perk that makes little fire cyclones and to proc that Roaring Flames. I generally take Healing Grenade with this just to make sure I can stay up and alive, and we don't have Sol Invictus, so we need some source of restoration. Then you take Throwing Hammer for the short cooldown, and easy recharge for Consecration, and then Rally Barricade, just solid. On the Fragments, you want to take Ember of Torches to get Radiant. That's always great for damage phases, and you'll be consecrating during damage for that extra little bit of damage over time from the Cyclones. Ember of Solace will make your Restoration Radiant effects last 50% longer, which is good. And then we take Ember of Empyrean, so solar kills can extend those Restoration Radiant effects. And lastly, we take Ember of Searing because it'll give us more melee energy anytime we kill scorched enemies, which we try to do pretty frequently. A couple honorable mentions here. Ember of Benevolence will give you plus 400% grenade, melee, and class ability regen speed whenever you apply Cure, Radiant, or Restoration to your allies, which you can do with both your Healing Grenade and Ember of Torches. So that can be really good in tight team situations where you're near allies a lot, but you just have to find a place to slot that in. And then Ember of Ashes will increase the Scorch stack supplied, which just means a little bit more damage over time on all your abilities. So, just showing you some gameplay for this one too. We have Consecration again, so really solid. Want to use those hands-on mods on the helmet to get that super energy as much as possible. I'm using Red Death Reformed here with the Catalyst, because this is one of the only ways you can access Restoration 2 on Titans and Hunters, and that is really helpful. So you can see you get that proc of Restoration 2, and then you just want to start getting solar kills, and that will keep you really, really tanky, really hard to kill. And you just have to make sure you keep it up so that you can keep those buffs up from Ember of Empyrean, but with Consecration and Crowds of Adds, that is pretty manageable. The Barricade is really good for damage resistance. Red Death Reformed is pretty decent, but it can fall off with kind of harder enemies because it just doesn't have a good multiplier there. Our super is charged already, which is great. Just working on these Cyclopses with our special weapon. And then we've got all these guys here stalling. And then we are going to consecrate them. Well, fire cyclones are great, and then we just slam the boss, and it's an instant kill. That's pretty much it. Really straightforward build. Still really solid. Good for a decent bit of content, but I'm hoping this gets a buff soon. That's pretty much all I've got for today. Just as a conclusion, here are those total damage and super DPS numbers and those recommended things. Feel free to screenshot this. If you're not familiar with my videos, all these slides will be linked in the description for you to refer to. I will also have a lot of dim links in the description, so check out those if you want to grab some builds for your super DPS phases. I just wanted to create a good resource for how to do good deep damage in all these activities like Court of Blades or Rushdown or just your normal dungeons and raids. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. I don't mind answering any, and hopefully that helps you out. With that said, I appreciate all the support, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks.